The barracks collapsed before dawn, and I crawled out alone into the snow. The telephone was dead, the radio crushed, and the orders meant nothing without a line to carry them. I fired from empty houses and shattered walls, letting them believe there were many of us. By nightfall, I understood the line held only because I was still there. On 16 December 1944, in the Ardennes region of eastern Belgium, American infantry units occupied a thin defensive line along forested ridges and narrow river valleys. The sector was considered quiet. Snow covered the fir trees, and the ground lay frozen beneath canvas tents and timber barracks hastily built beside village roads. The operational situation appeared stable. Intelligence briefings suggested that German forces were depleted and incapable of major offensive action. Among the infantry companies positioned near the village of Krinkelt was a young rifleman assigned to barracks duty after a week of patrol rotations. His work that morning was routine. He inspected weapons stacked along the timber wall. He checked ammunition bandoliers drying near a small iron stove. He recorded serial numbers of rifles left behind by men sent forward to dig additional foxholes along the ridge. The barracks had once been a farm storage shed. It had been reinforced with planks and sandbags, but it offered little protection against heavy shell fire. The men inside believed the front to be miles away. Telephone wires linked their company to battalion headquarters. A field radio rested on a wooden crate beside the door. Before dawn, at 5:30 hours, German artillery opened fire across the entire Ardennes front. The bombardment struck American positions without warning. High explosive shells landed along road junctions, supply depots, and sleeping quarters. In Krinkelt, the first rounds hit the ridge above the village. The second wave struck lower. The barracks absorbed 2 direct hits within seconds. The explosion collapsed the timber roof inward. Sandbags burst. The iron stove overturned. Flames spread along dry boards. Snow and splinters filled the air. The telephone line snapped instantly. The field radio was crushed beneath debris. When the blast wave cleared, the structure no longer stood. Only broken beams and scattered planks marked where the men had slept. The rifleman regained consciousness beneath a section of fallen timber. Snow had smothered part of the fire. Smoke drifted through the wreckage. He called out, but no one answered. He uncovered himself and moved across the debris. The men who had been inside showed no signs of life. Some had been killed instantly. Others had been trapped beneath the collapsed roof. The artillery barrage continued for nearly 90 minutes. Shells landed across the village and the surrounding forest. German infantry units, supported by armored vehicles, began advancing westward through the trees. Their objective was to break through the thin American line and seize road networks leading toward the Meuse River. The riflemen assessed the position. The barracks had served as a reserve point for spare rifles and ammunition. Many of the weapons were scattered but intact. Crates of ammunition lay partially buried in snow. He located his own rifle several yards from where he had been thrown. No other survivors emerged from the building. The company's defensive foxholes were positioned uphill, but the artillery barrage had likely struck them as well. Smoke obscured the ridge. No signal flares rose from the line. No runners arrived with orders. The communication lines were silent. The rifleman moved toward a shallow ditch along the village road. He carried 2 rifles and several ammunition clips. He placed the extra weapon beside him. He could hear movement in the forest to the east. German infantry advanced cautiously, using the shell fire as cover. Doctrine instructed infantrymen to hold fixed defensive positions in coordination with adjacent units. It assumed functional communication and mutual support. In this instance, neither condition existed. The rifleman could not determine whether neighboring units still occupied their sectors. He could not contact battalion headquarters. Withdrawal required orders that would not come. He decided to remain. The first German scouts entered the edge of the village shortly after 700 hours. They expected minimal resistance. Snow muted their footsteps. The rifleman waited until they crossed an open stretch of road. He fired 3 controlled shots. 2 enemy soldiers fell. The third retreated toward the tree line. The rifleman shifted position immediately. He retrieved the second rifle and relocated behind a stone wall partially buried in snow. He fired again when additional figures appeared between the houses. His aim was deliberate. He conserved ammunition. He avoided rapid fire. German return fire struck the wall. Bullets chipped stone and sent fragments into the air. The rifleman kept low. He observed that the enemy believed they faced multiple defenders. His use of separate firing points created that impression. The artillery barrage had ceased, replaced by small arms exchanges throughout the forest. The rifleman could see no American movement. He assumed that surviving elements had either withdrawn or been overrun. He crawled back toward the ruined barracks during a lull. Smoke still rose from the wreckage. He located additional ammunition and a carbine that had been stored near the door. He filled his pockets and returned to the road. German infantry advanced again, this time supported by a light machine gun positioned near a farmhouse. Sustained fire swept the village center. The rifleman responded by firing from an upper window of a damaged house. He broke the glass carefully and used the frame as partial cover. He fired at the machine gun crew until they repositioned. Hours passed in this pattern. The rifleman rotated between positions. He left one rifle visible in snow while firing from another angle. He dragged debris across open ground to suggest movement. He avoided exposing himself for more than seconds at a time. The temperature remained below freezing. Snow began falling again around midday. Visibility decreased. German troops hesitated at each approach, uncertain of the defending force's size. By early afternoon, German units bypassed parts of the village, attempting to push west toward more critical road junctions. Yet the continued resistance from within the village forced them to deploy additional men to secure the area. Each delay slowed their timetable. Several miles away, American headquarters struggled to understand the scale of the offensive. Reports arrived sporadically. Units were falling back under pressure. Commanders attempted to regroup along secondary defensive lines. Every hour gained was valuable. The rifleman's ammunition diminished steadily. He counted his remaining clips. He retrieved cartridges from the pouches of fallen comrades when possible, doing so quickly and without ceremony. He avoided looking at their faces. In mid-afternoon, a German patrol entered the village from the north. The rifleman allowed them to move past before firing from behind. His shots were precise. He then withdrew through a narrow alley and crossed into a barn at the edge of town. Inside, he found a crate of rifle grenades that had been stored earlier in the week. He attached one grenade to a rifle and fired toward a cluster of enemy soldiers using a wall for cover. The explosion scattered them. The blast echoed across the snow-covered fields. German officers concluded that the village contained a reinforced element rather than a single defender. They ordered cautious advance instead of rapid push. Time continued to pass. As evening approached, the rifleman felt fatigue and shock setting in. His left arm bled from a splinter wound sustained during the initial explosion. He wrapped it tightly with a strip torn from a blanket found in the barn. He drank melted snow. He checked his ammunition again. He could hear armored engines in the distance. The German offensive extended beyond his limited view, yet within the village, the enemy still advanced slowly. After nightfall, small groups of German infantry attempted infiltration. The rifleman relied on sound rather than sight. He fired only when movement became unmistakable.
He relocated after each engagement. The cold intensified. His breath formed clouds that revealed his position if he remained still too long. Near midnight, distant artillery fire resumed, but this time from the west. American units had established a temporary defensive line several miles away. Their guns targeted roadways and suspected assembly points. The rifleman could not see the effect, but he recognized the direction. At dawn on 17 December, German units attempted one more coordinated sweep of the village. They advanced in extended formation. The rifleman, now with minimal ammunition, fired deliberately from the upper floor of a house that had partially collapsed. He changed rifles twice, allowing empty weapons to fall where they lay. A German squad reached the base of the building. The rifleman withdrew through a rear exit and crawled across a frozen garden into a drainage ditch. From there, he fired his last full clip toward the road before retreating into the forest west of town. He did not attempt to hold the village beyond his capacity. His objective had narrowed to survival and delay. Within the forest, he encountered elements of another American unit establishing a fallback position. They were surprised to see a lone infantryman emerging from the direction of Krinkelt. He reported that the village had fallen, but that enemy forces had moved cautiously and in limited numbers for most of the previous day. Officers compared his account with other fragmented reports. They realized that German units had been slowed in that sector longer than expected. The delay allowed artillery batteries to withdraw intact and permitted engineers to prepare defensive obstacles along key roads. The rifleman received immediate medical attention for his arm. He provided a concise statement of events. He did not describe his actions in detail. He listed the names of those who had been in the barracks. In subsequent days, American forces stabilized portions of the Ardennes front. Reinforcements arrived. Weather conditions shifted. The German advance encountered increasing resistance. The village of Krinkelt changed hands more than once before the offensive stalled. The rifleman returned to duty after brief treatment. He was reassigned to a reorganized platoon. Official reports credited the delay in the village to isolated defensive resistance. His name appeared in a casualty-adjacent list, but without elaboration. There was no immediate ceremony. Command attention focused on the broader offensive. The destruction of the barracks was recorded as the result of concentrated artillery fire. The loss of the men inside was noted in unit logs. Months later, after the front had moved eastward, an after-action review examined early phases of the Ardennes battle. Analysts observed that in several villages, small groups or individual defenders had imposed disproportionate delays on advancing columns. Such resistance complicated German timetables and contributed to the eventual stabilization of the line. The rifleman's conduct was referenced indirectly in one such report. It described how abandoned weapons and improvised firing positions had created the impression of a reinforced strongpoint. The document emphasized initiative under communication failure. It recommended improved dispersal of sleeping quarters to reduce vulnerability to concentrated shell fire. He completed the war without further distinction. He resumed civilian life with little public recognition. His experience in the destroyed barracks remained largely unspoken outside his family. The village where the barracks once stood rebuilt slowly after the war. The farm shed was never reconstructed. Snow still covers the fields each winter. The road through Krinkelt remains narrow. Military historians later reviewing the Ardennes campaign noted that large offensives often hinge on hours rather than days. In those early hours on 16 December 1944, when communication lines failed and organized defense collapsed, a single infantryman used the materials at hand to create delay. His actions did not alter the scale of the offensive, but they bought time measured in hours, and in war, hours carry weight. His story illustrates the strain placed upon individuals when doctrine and structure fall away. It reflects the vulnerability of rear positions during surprise artillery strikes. It also demonstrates how perception on the battlefield can shape operational tempo. There are no monuments marking the exact site of the destroyed barracks. Records confirm the shelling and the casualties. The rest survives in scattered reports and one brief after-action note. In the broader narrative of the Ardennes campaign, attention often rests on armored columns and strategic reserves, yet small defensive stands within villages and along frozen roads contributed quietly to the eventual halt of the advance. The rifleman's name appears on a roster archived in regimental files. His role that morning was listed simply as infantry. If you value these lesser-known accounts of World War II and the individuals who held their ground in isolation, consider subscribing to support continued documentation of forgotten stories.